The Earth is heating up. This is not news. We have known for decades that the burning of fossil fuels releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. These gases trap heat and cause the planet's temperature to rise. The consequences of this warming are already being felt around the world, from more extreme weather events to rising sea levels. One of the most concerning impacts of climate change is the increase in global temperatures. As the planet warms, large swaths of land are becoming increasingly uninhabitable for humans. This is because extreme heat can have devastating effects on the human body, leading to heat stroke, dehydration, and even death. The situation is particularly dire for vulnerable populations, such as the elderly, the very young, and those with underlying health conditions. These groups are more susceptible to heat-related illnesses and less able to cope with extreme temperatures. The science is clear. We must act now to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and limit the extent of global warming. Failure to do so will have catastrophic consequences for human society and the natural world. As global temperatures rise, so too does the land area that is too hot for humans to inhabit. A recent study published in the journal Nature Climate Change found that a 0.5 degree Celsius increase in global average temperature would triple the amount of land uninhabitable for healthy adults. This is equivalent to the size of the United States. The study's authors define uninhabitable as areas where the wet bulb temperature exceeds 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 6 hours a day. Wet bulb temperature is a measure of heat stress that takes into account both temperature and humidity. When the wet bulb temperature reaches 35 degrees Celsius, the human body can no longer cool itself through sweating because the air is already saturated with moisture. For those over the age of 60, the situation is even more dire. The study found that a 0.5 degree Celsius increase in global average temperature would increase the amount of land uninhabitable for this age group from 21% to 35% of Earth's landmass. These findings have profound implications for human society. As large areas of the planet become too hot to live in, we can expect to see mass migrations, increased competition for resources, and social unrest. To understand why extreme heat is so dangerous for humans, it is important to understand how our bodies regulate temperature. When we get hot, our bodies sweat to cool down. Evaporation of sweat from the skin helps to remove heat from the body. However, this cooling mechanism only works if the air around us is cooler than our body temperature, and if the air is not already saturated with moisture. When the air temperature is close to or higher than our body temperature, and when the humidity is high, our sweat can no longer evaporate efficiently. This can lead to a rapid increase in body temperature known as hyperthermia. Uncompensable heat is a term used to describe conditions where the human body can no longer effectively cool itself through sweating. This occurs when the wet bulb temperature exceeds 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit. At this point, even healthy people sitting in the shade will succumb to heat stroke within 6 hours. Uncompensable heat is already a reality in some parts of the world, such as the Persian Gulf and the Indo-Gangetic Plain. As global temperatures continue to rise, uncompensable heat is projected to become more common in other parts of the world, including the southern United States, Australia, and parts of South America. While uncompensable heat represents a significant threat to human health, there is an even more extreme level of heat stress that is considered unsurvivable. Unsurvivable heat occurs when the wet bulb temperature reaches 39 degrees Celsius or 102 degrees Fahrenheit. At this point, Even healthy people sitting in the shade with access to water will die within 6 hours. Unsurvivable heat is currently rare, but it is projected to become more common as global temperatures continue to rise. A study published in the journal Science Advances found that if greenhouse gas emissions continue unabated, parts of the Persian Gulf could experience unsurvivable heat by the end of the century. The study's authors warn that unsurvivable heat could have devastating consequences for human populations living in affected areas. They call for urgent action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and limit the extent of global warming. While climate change is a global phenomenon, its impacts are not evenly distributed. Some regions of the world are particularly vulnerable to extreme heat due to their geographic location, climate, and population density. Some of the regions already facing extreme heat challenges include the Persian or Arabian Gulf. This region is particularly vulnerable to extreme heat due to its desert climate, high humidity, and reliance on outdoor labor. The Indo-Gangetic Plain, home to over 1 billion people, this densely populated region is already experiencing deadly heat waves on a regular basis. The southern United States, as temperatures rise, the southern United States is projected to experience a significant increase in the frequency and intensity of heat waves. Mexico. Mexico City in particular is at risk of becoming uninhabitable due to its high altitude and dense population. Australia. Australia is already experiencing the effects of climate change, including more extreme heat events. These regions are on the front lines of the climate crisis. Their experiences offer a stark warning of what the future holds for other parts of the world if we fail to act on climate change. The human cost of extreme heat is already being felt around the world. Heat waves are becoming more frequent and intense, leading to a sharp increase in heat-related illnesses and deaths. In 2003, a record-breaking heat wave in Europe killed an estimated 70,000 people. In 2010, a heat wave in Russia killed an estimated 55,000 people. And in 2022, a heat wave in India and Pakistan killed over 1,700 people. These are just a few examples of the deadly toll that extreme heat can take. As global temperatures continue to rise, heat waves are projected to become even more frequent and intense, posing a growing threat to human health. The elderly, the very young, and those with underlying health conditions are particularly vulnerable to heat-related illnesses. However, even healthy adults can succumb to heat stroke if they are exposed to extreme heat for extended periods. The science is clear. We must act now to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and limit the extent of global warming. Failure to do so will have catastrophic consequences for human society and the natural world. There are a number of things we can do to mitigate climate change, including transitioning to renewable energy sources. We must move away from fossil fuels and transition to cleaner, renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, and geothermal. Improving energy efficiency is crucial too. We can reduce our energy consumption by making our homes, buildings, and transportation systems more energy efficient. Protecting and restoring forests also plays a vital role in absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We must protect existing forests and restore degraded forests. Developing and deploying carbon capture and storage technologies can capture carbon dioxide from power plants and industrial facilities and store it underground. Taking action on climate change is not only the right thing to do, it is also the smart thing to do. Investing in clean energy and climate resilience will create jobs, improve public health, and strengthen our economy. While we must do everything we can to mitigate climate change, we must also adapt to the warming that is already baked into the system. This means taking steps to reduce our vulnerability to extreme heat and other climate impacts. Some adaptation strategies include developing early warning systems for heat waves. This will allow people to take precautions, such as staying indoors and drinking plenty of fluids when extreme heat is forecast. Creating cooling centers is another strategy. These are public spaces where people can go to escape the heat during heat waves. Planting trees and vegetation in urban areas can help to cool urban areas by providing shade and evapotranspiration. Designing buildings to be more heat-resistant is also important. This can include using reflective roofing materials, installing awnings, and orienting buildings to maximize natural ventilation. Adapting to a hotter world will require significant investment. However, unassertive waste means could pay off in the long run by reducing the human and economic costs of climate change. The Earth is heating up and the consequences are already being felt around the world. Extreme heat is becoming more common, threatening human health and well-being. We are facing a climate crisis, and we must act now to address it. We must reduce greenhouse gas emissions, invest in adaptation measures, and build a more sustainable and resilient future for all. This is not just a challenge for governments and policymakers, it is a challenge for all of us. We all have a role to play in addressing climate change. We can make changes in our own lives to reduce our carbon footprint, and we can demand action from our leaders. The future of our planet and the well-being of generations to come depends on the choices we make today. Let us choose wisely.